sometime in the late 90s, my daughter and I ended up in Moscow. A friend asked me to deliver a birthday present to her acquaintance, and when I called, it turned out that the acquaintance lived very close to where I was, so I said, "We'll come over right now." And 15 minutes later, we were at the gate of a house surrounded by an impenetrable 3-meter-high fence, which I would call a wall. 2 security guards looked inside our car and opened the gate. The hostess was already standing on the porch, actually, and waving for us to come inside. We found ourselves at the birthday party of not just new, but very new Russians, about 15 people, all well-groomed, well-dressed, all smiling. The decor in the house was moderately luxurious. Well, kind of like the Louvre, but a bit better. We tried to refuse, but they convinced us to sit and toast the hostess. When we sat down, my daughter was about 15 years old at the time, maybe 16. Everyone decided that I had come with a young, well, either wife or, as the Chinese say, a temporary companion. As she seated us, the hostess said, "Here he is," added some pleasant words, mentioned that my daughter was with me, and then she said, "He is from America." They poured me something that I am absolutely sure was very expensive. The man sitting across from me, about 55 years old, in a suit that, from my point of view, cost at least $3,000. My daughter later snorted and said, she said that she guarantees it costs $20,000 or more. He raised his right hand, calling for silence. Everyone respectfully fell silent. Addressing me but glancing left and right, he delivered the following speech, which I will try to convey as close to the original as possible. "I've been to America," he said. "I had partners there. And I'll tell you, Americans," here he paused for a moment and then said very emphatically, "are stupid." At that moment, my daughter discreetly but very painfully kicked me under the table, hitting my ankle. Kicking me under the table is usually my wife's traditional job, but in her absence, my younger daughter has completely taken over this role. "Idiots," said my vis-a-vis with a friendly smile. "Morons. They don't know anything about anything. Their heads are completely empty. Fine, they don't know who Dostoevsky is. They just don't." And so, the man giving the toast listed a long series of names of famous American writers, some of them unfamiliar to me. I started to open my mouth, but got kicked in the ankle again. The man giving the toast paused for a second. I started thinking to myself, when will he finish this nonsense, this stream of insults, this flow of accusations and claims that Americans are half-baked, uneducated, and ill-mannered? Then I'll step in and speak up. "That's strange. They say idiots live so well." And then I calmed down a little and started waiting for the end of the nonsense so that I could finish it off with such a killer, absolutely killer argument. The man giving the toast finally picked up the shot glass I had placed on the table and, now looking me straight in the face, said, "Personally, I don't understand how you, with several epithets that emphasize that I am, so to speak, the very beacon of science, intelligence, beauty, and so on." At that moment, I got kicked under the table by my daughter again. "How can you live surrounded by these idiots?" "But that's not what I said," he said. "I meant something else. I want to ask you something. You seem like a reasonable person, kind of intelligent." Strike. Under the table on the leg. I quietly started to take in air, realizing that I was about to have a chance to say something, to share my thoughts, when suddenly he spoke. "I want to ask you, how is it that these idiots live so well?" With that, he completely ruined all the pleasure I was about to get from finishing our conversation. "So I want to ask you, if Americans are such idiots, how do they have so much money, so much property, and such a good life that absolutely everyone envies them and dreams of either moving there to live or, at the very least, stealing something from them? If you can, try to explain this to me in the comments." On the talk show Evening with Vladimir Solovyov, Vladimir Zhirinovsky explained, America is a country of freaks. These are sick people." He thought for a moment and added, "Stupid." And now let's move on to the topic of our conversation today, the show. Which immigrant group robs America the best? And here I have to say we've been outdone. While we're arguing about the war with Iran, whether Trump is right, fighting in the comments about Ukraine and Russia, another war is quietly going on in America. Not a televised war, not with tanks and missiles, but a paper war, a Voltaire-style war. But its consequences could affect anyone who speaks Russian at home, and as always, we'll be the last to find out about it. Look at what's happening right now. While Russia is helping Iran, providing intelligence, covering for them, supplying them, while the Houthis are launching missiles at Israel, while American troops are entering the region, here inside the U.S., another story is unfolding. It's a story about how people with our last names, with our accents, living in our neighborhoods, are turning American medicine into an ATM, and now the government is turning to us, to the entire diaspora, with some very uncomfortable questions. A year ago, the name Operation Gold Rush, also rendered as Operation Golden Fever, flashed across the news. The largest healthcare fraud case in U.S. history. Medical equipment, supplies, and billions of dollars in Medicare bills for services that were never actually provided. The scheme looked very familiar to those who know the post-Soviet criminal genius. Ready-made supplier companies were bought, registered under frontmen, figureheads. Mountains of fake invoices started to be funneled through them, using stolen medical data of ordinary people. Then the money was withdrawn through a chain of companies, offshore accounts, cryptocurrency, and disappeared into the global financial fog. Back then, many of us said, well, yeah, it's unpleasant, but just some criminals, ours but not really ours. What does that have to do with us? The main thing is that it doesn't affect us personally. Life goes on. But the problem, ladies and gentlemen, is that the story didn't end there. It's just starting to unfold. And the state television propagandist Dmitry Kiselyov, the host of the weekly news program Vesti Nedeli, said that the Americans, as usual, are stupidly scaring the world with a catastrophe while sending an expedition there themselves to steal everything. Right now, it doesn't matter what the occasion was for saying this. He just said we're both stupid and thieves. It turned out that, are they stealing from us? In recent weeks, it's the second season of Russiagate. First, Brooklyn. Not some abstract banker, but a person from our neighborhoods, from that very Russian-speaking community where everyone knows each other. And he admits in court, yes, I helped launder millions of dollars stolen from the American healthcare system. This isn't the past, this is February of 26 right now. Next, Texas, Austin. The report is about Russiagate, a medical company, confidently described as a Russian company, Russian owners, Russian last names, accounts with huge sums, again catheters, again equipment, money going to Asia, Hong Kong, offshore accounts, and again rushing. A couple of weeks later in Houston, a Russian citizen living in the U.S. is charged in a case involving a multi-million-dollar Medicare scheme. This is emphasized in every report. Houston-based Russian national, well, a person from Russia living here, involved in a massive fraud. For the average viewer, this isn't just a set of individual personal tragedies, it's a pattern, a motif, as they say. Russian plus fraud plus billions, and all of this against the backdrop of a major war. Against the backdrop of Russia helping Iran and Iran striking at Israel and American interests. Against the backdrop of the news every day saying Russia supports Iran, Russia is fueling the escalation. Russia, enemy of the United States. Against this background, any news where the words Russia, Russians, deception, billions stolen appear together automatically go into the same folder in an American's mind. Threat. Over there it's missiles and drones, but here it's accounts, catheters, and banks. But the logic is the same. They are harming us. Now let's add Russian propaganda to this. For years on Channel 1, on Rossiya, on these endless talk shows, we kept hearing the same tune. Americans are stupid. Americans don't understand anything. They're easy to fool. We should take everything from them. And then an American who had never watched this nonsense suddenly saw the clips. Here are Russian hosts, here are experts, here are deputies laughing at the dumb Yankees. And then he turns on the next news story and hears that a Russian medical supplier has stolen billions from Medicare. A Russian banker from Brooklyn laundered millions. A Russian citizen from Houston was involved in a large-scale fraud scheme. You don't have to be a genius at logic to put two and two together. Those people on TV say Americans are idiots, they should be robbed. And these people here in America are the same, with similar accents and last names. Rob them. And where are you, me, our families in this picture? In his eyes, we easily become a continuation of the same story. It doesn't matter. Did we run from Putin? Did we not run? Did we vote for him or against him? The important thing is the label in his mind, Russians. Dmitry Medvedev, former president of Russia and deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, said the following: Americans, I hate them. They are bastards and degenerates. They want us dead. And as long as I am alive, I will do everything to make them disappear. During a lecture for school children and students, Medvedev demonstrated slides from the scenario and quotes from his own channel. Atlantic impotence. Raped by the lords of darkness. That's about Western politicians. These aren't speechwriters. This is the official position of the second person in Russia's security system. It's no different from how Hamas teaches children in Gaza. Now the question: how will this affect our everyday lives if things keep going this way? Let's start with the simplest thing: money. Banks are already living in a reality where every day they receive reports, new cases, new schemes, new names. For compliance. My God, what a word I just said in Russian. Yes, so it's all very simple. There's a high-risk group. When too many high-profile cases accumulate in this group, people start to treat it differently. A Russian last name, business-related, medicine, or something close. Money transfers abroad. That means high risk. That means additional checks, transaction delays, and account freezes during the review. And you could be an absolutely honest person, but you'll fall under the same filters as real fraudsters. The next layer is business, career. Imagine an investor, an insurer, a large clinic. He has statistics going back 100 years. Over 23 years, there have been several high-profile cases of medical fraud involving people from the former USSR. Consciously, he can say that he's not a racist, that every case is unique. But subconsciously, it's easier to refuse partnership, joint work, or hiring than to take the risk. It's easier not to hire another Robinovich if someone already had a bad experience with 3 Kaimoviches. It's not always ill will. Often it's fear of losing money, reputation, or a license. Another level is politics and public opinion. American society is tired. Wars, inflation, crises, problems with the healthcare system. And when they are shown, here is a specific Medicare program that you have been paying into for decades. And here are the people who have taken billions out of it. Everything that you have paid into it. The response from society is simple. Urgently find those responsible and punish them. A politician who comes out and says, I will restore order, I will tighten things up, I'll put them in jail, I'll do this and that. He gets a standing ovation. And here there's a very high risk that the Russian-speaking diaspora will end up on the list of troublemakers. Not because we're all bad, but because it's just too convenient. It's just too convenient to put us on that list. The most unpleasant thing about this whole story is that we, unlike our talented compatriots and their schemes, know almost nothing about this and don't talk about it. We live as if we're somewhere far away. All that gold rush, Brooklyn, Texas, Houston stuff. It's somewhere out there, in the news. Meanwhile, a narrative is taking shape behind our backs. Russia is helping Iran. Russian officials laugh at the American way of life, at Americans in general. Russian immigrants are ripping off American health care. In such an atmosphere, any diaspora that looks suspicious becomes a convenient scapegoat. By the way, Sergei Lavrov, the Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs, said the famous phrase, "Idiots be, I won't continue," which was said in 2015 at a closed meeting. The reaction to the Americans was accidentally recorded and leaked to the press. When an American viewer sees clips from Russian television, and such clips were actively circulated in the U.S. after 2022, he doesn't see just a few oddballs. He sees a system. A popular comedian has been saying for 30 years, Americans are stupid. State channels repeat every day in prime time, Americans don't understand. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson feels sorry for the Pentagon staff. The deputy chairman of the Security Council calls them bastards. And then in the news, a Russian scammer stole $1 billion from Medicare. You've already filed it away in your head. The connection is obvious. The prosecutors will paint the picture of Russians in America for us. But of course, it's not only Russians who rob America. Fraud in the American healthcare system is not a problem of just one diaspora. It's an industry in which dozens of ethnic groups are involved. The chief investigator of the U.S. Department of Health, Tim Menke, described the situation very simply. In California, we see Armenians. In Texas, Nigerians. In Florida, Cubans. Wherever you look, it's the same story. Somalis. Federal prosecutors estimate the stolen amount at no less than $9 billion. The Russians issued invoices for $10.6 billion, but managed to receive only $900 million, so they almost got $1 billion after all. 11 defendants. That comes out to about $100 million per person, or even 80, a bit less. Peanuts. Members of a transnational criminal organization from Russia and other countries. Allegedly, they set up a scheme with medical equipment. They billed Medicare for $10.6 billion. Of course, there were differences, but there was also a lot in common. Armenians in California. By the way, not only there, in 25 states, 163 million claims, bills, 35 million have already been received. Then they managed to stop them. Pakistanis. $650 million. The second case involved Pakistanis in Arizona, $703 million. Nigerians, they're at something like $87 billion, but that was during the pandemic. Cubans in Florida, medical equipment and hospices. Chinese in New York and Flushing, hospice fraud. White Americans, of course. Everyone is stealing, I understand. But not everyone fits into a single political narrative. Somalis and Russians are currently the most convenient targets because they match the current political agenda. Because of the immigration crisis and Russian geopolitics, that doesn't mean the crime wasn't committed. It means that the reputational punishment imposed on the entire diaspora is disproportionate and politically selective. And still, who are we really? This is what, in my opinion, we need to talk about right now. Not when another one of our talented entrepreneurs flees the U.S. with hundreds of millions. Not when another politician builds a career on fighting Russian fraud. But now, while we have a chance to explain that we don't want to be part of this story, those truly robbing this country should be held accountable and not hide behind the entire diaspora, because the picture is already being painted for us without our involvement. But we have a different story. And it also needs to be told. The Russian-speaking diaspora is one of the most educated and productive waves of immigrants in American history. Sergey Brin came from Moscow as a 9-year-old boy. He founded Google, a company that changed the way humanity receives information. Jan Koum, who grew up in Soviet Ukraine, created WhatsApp, a messenger that I think is used by 2 billion people today. Max Levchin, also originally from Kiev, became a co-founder of PayPal and changed the global financial system. This is not an exception. This is the rule. This is a pattern. Tens of thousands of doctors, engineers, scientists, programmers, mathematicians, people from the USSR, Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus work in universities, laboratories, hospitals. They treat, write code, and raise American children. The Jewish wave of emigration from the USSR brought more than just people. It brought culture, education, respect for knowledge, and the habit of thinking systematically. That's exactly what Americans call the Russian school of thought. And this happens in medicine, in physics, in chess, in mathematics. This diaspora is rarely acknowledged when people talk about the contributions of immigrants. They work too quietly, they complain too little. But it's this very silence that's becoming a problem now. As long as we don't speak about ourselves, others will speak about us. And they say what is convenient for them, not what is true or what we would like. The conclusion is simple. Those who robbed America bear personal responsibility for it. Those who built America, and there are incomparably more of us, have the right to have this known and remembered. And it seems to me that we, gentlemen, need to take every opportunity, whether we're asked or not, to tell people how successful our immigrant community is, how many doctors and mathematicians we have, how many scientists and athletes we have, how much we ourselves and by bringing our children have done for this country. We are very grateful to it. But we also did not come empty-handed, and not to rob, but to create together with Americans, and to give back to the country what we borrowed from it, with interest. That's all, ladies and gentlemen. Until next time.